Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be giving my first impressions of checking out the new live-action Netflix original series Avatar: The Last Airbender. I have been a long-time fan of the animated series and was really looking forward to hopefully seeing a good turn and a good adaptation for the live-action format for this one. So let's get ready to jump in and talk about my first impressions and thoughts on the series. Welcome again. My name is Austin, and I have just finished watching the first episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the new Netflix original series. It dropped today on Netflix. They put out the full first season, but I wanted to give a first impressions just kind of on episode 1 before I dive into the rest of the show. I'm not planning on like binging through it all in one day. I kind of want to go a couple episodes at a time, enjoy it, appreciate it for what it is, not rush through it. So with all that out of the way, let's start talking about this first episode. So the episode kicks off and immediately I really enjoyed the music. It's definitely feeling like Avatar's music because that's really the first thing you hear when we jump into it. And then we hop into the Fire Nation where an Earthbender is trying to get this scroll of information out so they can get it back to the Earth Kingdom. Different from how the animated series started, so I was curious what they were doing, kind of what they're setting up with it, and they're basically setting up the whole attack of the Fire Nation on the air nomads to wipe them out, as they know the next Avatar is going to be coming from the air nomads nation. So it's kind of setting up that whole thing that we were told about and get snippets of in the animated series, but they kind of gave us a whole opening sequence to that. And as much as it differs from the beginning of the original animated series, I thought it was a good way to kind of give a little bit more context to people checking out the show for the first time who are unfamiliar with the lore and the history of the series and the story that's being told. I will also add on, this is a fight sequence that we get in this first scene, and the bending that we get to see from earthbending and firebending in this one is leaps and bounds better than any of the bending we saw in the M. Night Shyamalan The Last Airbender movie, which you don't have to do much to do better than that, but I was thoroughly impressed and appreciated the bending that we got to see showcased just in this first sequence. Now, the effects looked really great for it. It's very tangible feeling with the combat that they're doing. It feels like they really, learned the stunts and the choreography and stuff, and the effects looked really good for it too. The CGI was really solid throughout this fight sequence here. Going forward beyond that, some of the effects look better than others throughout the rest of this first episode, which I'm sure will kind of carry on through the rest of the series. I've not read or seen really much for reviews yet so far, aside from hearing that some of the effects are hit and miss, which I can confirm just from seeing this first episode. Not that any of them necessarily look bad or unappealing. It's just some look really solid and really great, and others are just okay. So that's kind of what you can expect effects wise going into this. But being as diverse in the elemental use throughout this series, it's understandable that, you're not going to be able to sink a ton of money into every single effect for this one because it's a very effects heavy show. They have this huge world to build and flesh out and give visual style to as they adapt it to this live action format. They have all of the characters and the different nations and cultures to give an adaptation to. And speaking of which, the costume designs in the makeup work is absolutely fantastic. They did a great job really embodying the characters and the original animated character design and adapting that into the live action format. All the main characters, Aang, Sokka, Katara look great. Zuko looks great. Iroh looks great, and all of the different culture that we get to see. We get a little bit of Fire Nation stuff, but mostly you're getting the Southern Water Tribe and the Southern Water Temple, as that's what's introduced in the beginning. So really great work all around with the set design, the character design, the costumes, makeup, all of that stuff is fantastic and really solid. So great job to Netflix on the production design for this series for sure. As far as what's covered in this first episode, as I mentioned, it is differing slightly in that they kind of restructure a few things. As I mentioned, we start off with this setup for the Fire Nation attacking the Southern Air Temple and wiping out all of the air nomads, whereas in the original series it starts off with Sokka and Katara finding Avatar Aang in this cylinder of ice, in this globe of ice. And so we get a little bit of different beginning to it, but it essentially still covers all the same stuff. Now, there's one change that I think if I remember right, I haven't watched the show for a few years, the animated series that is, but the way Aang is absent from the Southern Air Temple in this series is different from how he's absent in the animated series. In the animated series, he pretty much runs away because of his fear of this responsibility of being the Avatar. In this one, it's there, but it's more like he's nervous and timid about this responsibility. It's not something he wants, which is part of his character, but he's kind of just going away to kind of clear his head, and he's just getting away to go somewhere where he feels more comfortable, confident, just to think over these things. And then they get caught in the storm, they get trapped in the ice, and then he goes into his, incubation, for so to speak, for 100 years. So it's a little bit different, but it still kind of accomplishes the same thing. I'm hoping they still kind of drive home the idea of his character arc and how he chooses to leave and run away and has that guilt that kind of helps to drive him and give him that motivation for the series going forward. So I'm hoping we can kind of circle back around to that a little bit, but I don't mind that they diverted a little bit as long as we still kind of come back to and stick with that. Aside from that, this first episode is an hour long. I think it's an hour and 3 minutes, and it essentially covers the events of the first 3 episodes of the series, which is kind of what I expected as far as the adaptation would go, because if you got a 20-minute episode from an animated show, you put it into an hour-long format, that's 3 episodes per episode from animation to live-action adaptation. So you get the whole introduction of Aang and all the main cast of characters, minus some of the ones we'll get to learn of down the road, and it ends with him going to the Southern Air Temple and them finding out that, everything's gone. Now, he is given that information from the Southern Water Tribe, whereas in the animated series, he finds that out when he gets there, but still accomplishes the same goal, just shuffling the information around a little bit. And so this episode ends with them on their way to Kyoshi Island to find out more about the avatars and stuff. And so I think we're off to a solid start. I'm not someone who's going into here expecting it to be awful. I'm not expecting it to be as good as the original animated series. I consider the original animated series one of the greatest shows made of all time, and I'm not going to let my opinions or thoughts on this adaptation sway one way or another based on it. I'm just excited to see the opportunity for new fans to get to dive into this. Hopefully, if they enjoy this one, they'll also go and watch the animated series. We will see how things go as we move forward, but I wanted to at least get my initial thoughts and impressions out of the way for the series without necessarily rushing to check the whole thing out and give it a review. So if I feel like it, I'm going to give this whole series a review down the road. But for now, I think it's off to a solid start. I really enjoyed this first episode, the story that was brought up. We got all the right beats and pieces are in place here, aside from shuffling a few things around and maybe a couple story decision changes so far. But I'm still excited, looking forward to this one going forward. I'm getting ready to start episode 2 right after getting this video shot. So thank you for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed getting to hear my first impressions. This is a little bit of a diversion from the foreign film February month we're in, but I wanted to get my thoughts out there while everything was fresh and everyone's excited about this series. So thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. Go ahead and catch some of my foreign film February videos I've been putting out on the channel recently, and I will see you in the next one.